3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sprite Sheet Animation Part 4. We are going to put the finishing touches on our first sprite sheet by adding an idle animation, adding a sound effect, and bringing in a little special interaction effect. So what we want to do is click C inside, and first things first, you always want to do save as copy and change that to part 4. If everything was working from your last project, it should be looking something like this. Where your character's fully animated and walking around. So what we want to do, and something that always adds a bit of interactivity, is if you notice, wherever you stop moving, your animation should stop moving on to the next frame. And Snorlax is mid-walk, and that doesn't look that good. So what we usually want to do, and when you go to the sprite sheet, you should see something called an idle animation. So that's what an animation that in a game, if you don't touch anything, your character goes back into. It's usually just kind of maybe sitting down or cycling or just being bored or standing and breathing. So I see up at the top here, this probably is the Snorlax idle animation. He just kind of sits down on the ground and kind of breathes up and down, and his kind of hands are moving a little bit. Now that's going to be a more advanced version of this project that we're going to do later when we get into precise character animation. But for right now, we're going to do the easy version of that. And the easy version is to go to your costumes tab and click through and look through the frames of animation and pick the frame of animation that most looks like your character is standing. For me, it looks like Snorlax walking, number 8. I'm going to use that as his idle standing animation. So what we want to do now is put together a little bit of code that will make it so that Snorlax goes to his standing animation whenever we're not touching something. So right here, we've got all this code that the arrows are touching lots of things. I can duplicate that, and I'm going to toss it all out. Because pretty much, as you see, so much of introductory coding is going to be based in if-then statements in forever loops. So you create a forever condition. If you do something, something else happens. And you start to build your interaction on top of that. So what we want to do now is going to be a little different, because we don't want Snorlax to go to his idle animation when we do something. We want him to go to his idle animation, and we want your character to go to their idle animation when we don't do something. And that's not press the arrow key. It's not just the right key. We're going to click here, and we're going to click down to any key. So if not any key is pressed, then what we're going to do is we're going to put a wait block here. So we want to delay this so it doesn't happen immediately. Let's do a 0.2 seconds. And then we are going to go to our looks tab, and instead of using next costume, which we'd used before, we're going to switch it to an exact costume. We're going to switch costume to Snorlax walking 8. So now when I run this code, so he's going to be walking, when I let go, he switches back to his standing pose. So that looks great. So now we've added our idle animation, and we've got 2 things left to do. One, I want to add a sound effect. So I went to YouTube and I found a Snorlax sound effect. I took it over to Audio Cutter Pro and I brought it into Scratch, same way that we did before. So now what I want to do is I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to go back. So you could set this to any key you want, but I'm going to use the space bar. So I want it to be when I press the space bar, I want Snorlax to shout out his phrase. So I'm going to go over to the sounds tab, and I'm going to bring in play sound, Snorlax sound effect. I'm going to press play. Now one of the problems here is if we don't put a wait block, you'll hear we don't want it to go too fast, so we probably want to take it. If you wanted to look into the sound effects here, you can see that the Snorlax sound effect is 1.79 seconds long. So what you could do is do a wait 2.8 seconds long. So now that sound effect can only play once it's already finished, even if you're hitting the spacebar. For our final touch, I want to add a special effect like we did on mandalas, but to my Snorlax. I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate, and I am going to keep it as spacebar. What this is about is adding interactivity. Usually when you play games, a really good game element is that you feel that when you press a button, the character reacts, either an animation or sound effects. And I want to add a special effect. I'm going to create an effect just like we did for our mandala. So I'm going to go into the looks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say set color. I'm going to put that in the forever loop. So always going to be setting the color back to normal, but I'm going to get this change color, and I'm going to put both those in here. I'm going to change it to a negative. So it's going to flash. What I want it to do is just kind of flash a color when I press spacebar. So let's try it out. Press play. So I'm going to walk around and I'm going to press Nice. Okay. When you've finished with these three things, when you've added an idle animation, when you've added a sound effect, and when you've added a interaction effect, then you are finished with this project. And we are going to move on to the next one, where we're going to add projectile animation and interaction. So that means kind of shooting something out or creating an object to throw across the screen. We're going to start to do the basic elements of a shooter game or a dodge game. I'm very excited to see what you make, and I look forward to it. Talk to you soon. Bye.